Hello, listeners. We are back with another episode of LFG with Amir and friends. It's been a while. We were on hiatus, but we're back with some kick-ass content. Your co-host Keenan and I have been working on a bunch of stuff while we've been out, and we are raring to go. Trust me. Our first guest today is Wesley. I hope I don't mispronounce your last name. Dugle, and now Keenan, your co-host, is going to take it away with Wes. All right, Keenan.
Hey, so Keenan in the studio with Wes today. Me and Wes go way back. I met him in, I think, fall of 2009. We met through Theta Chi at San Jose State University. So you guys haven't really heard too much about my background with San Jose State, but I got an old piece of nostalgia here. See if you guys can.
Oh man.
Yeah, this is.
Maybe I should have brought mine out.
I'm not wearing it because it's very old and I need to hit it with a Tide bleach stick. But the way.
I hear you, man. Mine's pretty ancient as well.
Yeah. So the way that works is when you join a fraternity, you have a big bro, little bro, and Wes was mine. And so when I crossed over, he gave me. They call those your letters. But anyway, so just a little piece of nostalgia there. So when I met Wes, he was doing a lot of different things. We both went to the same department, JMC. He's got his degree in his bachelor's in journalism. We're going to talk about that a little bit later in the second segment. But when I knew you back in 2009, 2010, Wes, you were always working over the punching bag that was in the back of the Theta Chi house. And I just want you to kind of go through like a brief timeline of how you went from being kind of like an armchair sort of interest in the sport to then actively like standing up and participating in MMA, because you've got a lot of history. It goes back for some number of years from when you were in high school when you did kendo and you studied with a left-footed stance to then now what you started doing in 2018 to 2020 when you were getting more serious with MMA. So that's kind of like a 10, 15-year timeline, and I'd like you to kind of just go over that with us.
Right. So a few quick corrections. It's actually more in reverse. Muay Thai is what I was for a fight, and MMA is more like a side gig martial art that I'm training. It was kind of where I started. But MMA is what got me into martial arts and finally decided to start training. And a big reason for that is that, at Theta Chi, where we both went to a fraternity, one of the first rush events I attended was a UFC pay-per-view. And that night I happened to watch a guy named Lyoto Machida. He was a 13-0 light heavyweight, square up against another 13-0 light heavyweight named Thiago Silva. Lyoto, for your listeners who don't know him, he's a half Japanese, half Brazilian dude, and as a half Japanese dude myself, that was already, I was like connecting to him. I was like, oh, holy shit, I've never seen another hopper like myself in such a setting. And he knocked his ass out that night, and I was like, damn, I guess I'm a fan now. And I started watching MMA pretty religiously. A lot of the bros in the house are big mixed martial arts fans. A few of them are both amateur and professional mixed martial artists. I'm not sure if you remember Justin Davis, but he's a pro
Justin
in MMA right now. Minor league promotion, mind you, not the UFC. And Rich Hussein, I don't know if you remember him. He also did amateur MMA as well. But yeah, from there it was mostly just a passing interest. I just liked hitting the bag in the gym whenever I got the chance. I bought like a cheap pair of MMA gloves and just went to town on it. But then, eventually 2015 rolled around, and I joined one of those UFC branded gyms in Torrance, and that gym was run by a professional mixed martial artist named Adel Altamimi, who's an Iraqi-born mixed martial artist with a Kyokushin black belt background. And he taught me a lot of my basics, and that's kind of what jump-started me into like, okay, maybe I can do this, maybe I have some skill in it, because, I was definitely not like completely green when I was doing it, and I found that I had like a good sense for it. So I was like, well, let's see how far I can go with this. And eventually in 2018, I I decided when I got, a bump in pay raise when I got a new job, it's like maybe I should join like an actual gym, like an actual Muay Thai gym or an actual karate gym. And because I couldn't decide between whether I wanted to do karate or Muay Thai, I decided to do both because, both are very relevant to mixed martial arts. Karate is more my style. It's what Lyoto does. He was a Shotokan black belt. And but Muay Thai is what's used by pretty much all mixed martial artists. And I was like, I got to know both because I like karate, but I need Muay Thai. And most mixed martial artists would agree that you need to know some Muay Thai at least. So I ended up joining 2 gyms. I actually ended up joining Lyoto's dojo because he actually moved to Southern California. He has a dojo in Lomita. I actually learned under his brother Chinzo the most, and I got all the way up to blue belt through 2020.
So
and I learned, yeah.
So I'm going to interrupt for a second because you've gone over a lot of ground, and I want you to clarify because you were talking about how Muay Thai and karate is important. Maybe the listeners don't know too much about that. Can you explain, the differences and maybe talk a little bit about, which one's more grappling, which one's more combinations, and the technical stuff? Just
sure. Yeah, there's aesthetic differences, there's style differences, stance is way different compared to both. I like to tell people my style is karate style just because it's a little bit of both. And basically, the way to kind of think about it is that, everybody understands what jab is. If you know martial arts, everyone knows what a cross is, a hook, kick. But the thing is, across all martial arts, those kicks, those punches all look different. A jab in karate looks a hell of a lot different than a jab in boxing. A cross in boxing looks a lot different compared to a cross in Muay Thai. And kicks especially are very different compared to the two. Like, for instance, karate I would describe as more of like a slingshot kind of a kick. Basically, you bring in your heel to your leg as much as possible when you're throwing that kick, and then at the last second you kind of snap that kick forward to create almost like I said, like a slingshot effect when you throw it. Whereas Muay Thai, when you throw a kick, you're driving typically at a diagonal angle. You're aiming almost entirely with your shin. Between the two, they both have their purposes. There's both benefits and drawbacks to using one over the other. I'm pretty adept at using both. I would say karate is a little bit more finesse in terms of what you can do with that style of kick. They call it maigiri in karate. But Muay Thai hits absolutely harder, in my opinion. So there's a difference in the way it's used, and certainly in terms of stances, they're way different. Karate's more wide stance and closer to a side stance, whereas Muay Thai is a front-facing stance. And the reason that they do that is because in Muay Thai, leg kicks are allowed. In karate, and most karate disciplines, leg kicks are not allowed. So that wide stance is actually pretty susceptible to Muay Thai kicks because you're hanging your lead leg out, pretty far, and it can be attacked pretty badly. So a lot of people swear by Muay Thai because of that, because karate guys are typically not used to leg kicks, and they can get chewed out pretty badly from it. In fact, that's how Lyoto lost his belt, is because the guy he faced in the UFC, because he eventually became champion. The guy he faced in the UFC was a Muay Thai guy, and he just kicked the shit out of his legs.
Hey, so I appreciate that, because what you just did there was explain the different weaknesses and strengths, that not so much weaknesses, but just the differences and how they complement each other. And that's very interesting, because we're going to get into some of the fight analysis, which you were just getting into a little bit later on. But I want you to hop back into your timeline. So you went to the new gym around 2018 you were talking about, and you started preparing for your first debut sort of bout. Can you talk about the preparation for all of that?
Yeah, so coming out of the pandemic era, which is still technically going, like in 2021, I hopped into my bro's gym, who I met through my Muay Thai gym, which both me and him eventually left in 2020. And he was training quite a few folks that he knew from various gyms that he would teach at for Muay Thai bouts, and it kind of got me interested. Like, hey, why not? Because it was always in the back of my head. I was always playing out these fantasies about getting in the ring and knocking somebody out, and I felt like I definitely had the skill for it. It's just am I fit enough? And so basically in 2022, I started to feel like I was really getting it, and I'll get into later about what I mean by getting it. I was like, okay, I think I'm ready to do this, and so I started training a little bit more consistently. I started taking more prets and getting more of the technique down and more of the finesse stuff. And basically I was like, okay, let's go for it. And it's, training for that fight, was a lot of fucking work. I mean, I went from training maybe 3 to 4 times a week to like 5 to even 10 times a week. Like I was training twice a week at a few different, twice a day at a few different occurrences during this training camp. It was really intense. At times it was awful. There's definitely times where it's like, damn, I really don't want to go here right now, just because, I work full time, and, that's a lot to put on both your body and mind to be handling, full-time work and training for a fight that is, of course, very dangerous. And so, but, for me personally, I just was like, it's just going to keep nagging me in the back of my head until I do it. And to me, it was like, this was kind of like my black belt. Like, I need to go and do this and get that win, and martial arts will forever be solidified for me. Like, and, my coach, his Rue, he was pretty blunt with me one time where I was like, I really can't consider myself a martial artist until I fight for real. And he was like, yeah, Wes, that's absolutely correct. Like, you can't really call yourself a fighter until you actually fight. So, because otherwise, I like to say, if all you do is just hit mitts and spar, all you're engaging in is theory. Like, this might happen if I fight. This might go this way if I, train like this. Like, until you actually do it, you don't really know for sure. Because there's a world of difference between full power, fighting somebody and sparring them, where you are holding back your more lethal kicks and punches, and taking care of both yourself and your sparring partner, whereas obviously fight, you're trying to knock the motherfucker out. Like, so yeah, it was pretty scary, just because of course it's very dangerous. Fighting is mega dangerous. There's a few times where I was like, damn, I wish I was into bowling instead of this shit. But something about fighting is just more engaging for me. It's just, I might get more into it a bit later, but mostly it's just about, feeling strong more than anything. When I spar, when I do martial arts, like, I legit feel like a strong person. Like I was never very good at most sports growing up. I was picked last in kickball, and I think my total box score from my youth basketball era, back when I was a kid, was maybe 1 point and a single rebound, and that was like going 1 for 2 at the free throw line. like I was not very good at any of those things, but for whatever reason, martial arts just clicks a lot better. And
I appreciate that sentiment, Wes, because that's going to lead us into the next segment. The fact that martial arts started to click and gel for you. You've led us into that whole part about how you built up to the fight. We're going to talk about how that went for you in just a minute. We're going to go to our 5-minute commercial, and we'll be back. And we're back. Hey, I appreciate you guys hanging out through that commercial break. We are talking to Wesley Dugle. He is an old friend from my Theta Chi days in San Jose. And the first segment, we were talking a lot about his process of moving into the world of amateur fighting for MMA. And now I kind of want to talk about some of his other stuff. So, Wes, you were in the journalism department, JMC. with me at San Jose State, and we have kind of like a similar background in that regard because we both got our degrees in journalism. And one of the things you started doing in 2009, 2010 when I knew you is you started writing and doing things like movie reviews. And then eventually in 2019, 2020, you started a more formalized version of that writing, which was Pop Wasabi, which is basically a website that features all of your content, your writing, your thoughts, and sort of like a philosophical outlook. You go through a great deal of a reflective process in there. Your articles are very well thought out. They're long form, but they're well written. And you've got a bunch of stuff on there. You did a review on the new Avatar movie, Avatar 2. You did a bunch of other stuff. But one of the articles that I wanted to do a bit of a dive into was the article you did on the more popular Japanese manga known as Berserk. And that manga's been around for a long time. And one of the characters in there, his name is Guts, and he's kind of mentioned in the comic as his nickname is the Struggler. And you did a pretty good article on Berserk called Why We Struggle. And it was very interesting because you were thinking about your struggle moving into MMA, preparing yourself for this fight, and then you had an injury, which kind of postponed the fight. And I want you to just kind of walk us through that whole process, what happened leading to the fight, the injury, and what it is you're planning on doing now to kind of get yourself back in the ring.
I wrote that article, I think, a little before I started training camp. But it was mostly just talking about like basically why we keep going even when it just sucks pretty consistently, to put it bluntly. Like, life is pretty damn hard. It's unfair more often than it's not. And Berserk is, of course, the classic manga series. A lot of people swear by it. It has a ton of influence over both, current manga and anime series, video games, and plenty of, Western TV shows, movies, and comic book series as well. I mean, just the gigantic sword that Guts carries around, like, hell, I'm even wearing a Berserk shirt right now. Like, it's, it's an iconic look. But, I hadn't actually started reading the series until 2020, just because I was, locked into my house and couldn't really go anywhere. And it had been on the docket for a long time, and just was like, okay, let's give this shit a read finally. And the interesting thing about Berserk is that it's kind of, despite its grim, dark nature and tone, I don't know how much your listeners are familiar with the series. It deals a lot in literally blood and guts and death and just horrible shit happening to the heroes all the damn time. It's, despite all that, a fairly positive series that examines basically redemption and coming back from your lowest, healing from trauma, and finding love in others, basically. And I wrote that just to describe how my own life has gone and how I basically progressed to arriving at a sense of, I understand why I keep going now, even when it sucks, because basically the reason why he's, Guts is dubbed the Struggler in the series is because, he has been branded with this demonic seal that basically where the demons will keep on hunting him until they consume his soul. And it's basically kind of like a metaphor for all the negative energy that just pursues us throughout our entire lives. And it's just going to keep on trying to put you at your lowest and eventually kill you.
Yeah, it can drag you down.
Make you give up.
The undercurrent can drag you down. And so transitioning from that, you wrote that while you were ramping up to your fight, building up energy, building up momentum, and then you got injured. And that kind of took the wind out of your sails. Can you talk about how you got injured, what happened, and talk about like how you were on a fight card. You had set up a card, you had booked it through your gym. I saw the tickets that you had posted on Instagram. I even sent you some money because I was like, hey, go for it.
I still appreciate it.
Yeah. So what happened with all that? Just walk us through that.
Wow. So yeah, I had booked my fight for September 30th, fighting for International Fight Systems, I think it's called. It's like IFS, it's a amateur Muay Thai promotion in Anaheim. And I was all set to go. I was 3 weeks out. I was in the best shape of my life. In fact, the night my injury occurred, I literally felt like, okay, finally, I feel confident. I feel like I'm ready to go, and I can fucking, beat the shit out of my opponent. and then, like, what happened is that my elbow basically developed what they call a bursitis. Think of it kind of like I think it's best described as a giant blister that forms underneath your skin. And I'm not exactly sure how it developed, but bursitis is typically a workman's injury. It's like something that happens over time when you're just overextending it and overusing it, and eventually it just fills up with liquid, and it just, turns your elbow stiff, basically.
Yeah, that sounds like RSI,
Sure.
like repetitive strain injury. It sounds like RSI. That's from overuse, and that was because you accelerated your training. I mean, that's part of the process of it.
I think my body maybe wasn't ready for just how much I was putting into it at the time. Like, I was definitely in the best shape of my life, but I basically went from being, more of a casual martial artist to a full-time athlete. And if anything, my training camp gave me such a stronger appreciation for what pro athletes put themselves through, because I can only imagine what a week leading up to a football game must feel like for football players, or even basketball, all that stuff, because they obviously have to train very consistently. But basically, my elbow developed bursitis, and unfortunately, when you have a bursitis sac, it is also very susceptible to infection. And because of the nature of gyms, I contracted cellulitis on top of it. And it landed me in the emergency room, and basically my elbow and my arm turned into a giant meat sack, and we had to kill it with antibiotics via IVs for 5 days. And
it's pretty common to get those kinds of injuries, and if you don't take care of them, you can get staph infections, and it causes these giant sort of gout wounds. It's not a joke. A lot of people get into a weird headspace where they think that there's that mentality, like, one more rep, I'll push harder, I'll go harder, but there is a point where you do need to stop and not permanently injure yourself. So that sounds like you actually made a wise decision there.
Yeah, I mean, it was tough. For a minute, I thought maybe it could heal, in time. Like, when I initially went into the doctor, they said, there's a possibility it could heal within a phase, and you can be, back in the gym in no time. And I postponed canceling it for a few days because of it, because I was like, okay, maybe if we just keep on taking these antibiotics, because I was taking them by pill form to start, it'll just be fine. But by pill form, it doesn't hit as strong, and my arm was just getting worse. So eventually it's like, shit, I got to go to the emergency room and, urgent care. And I was in the hospital for 5 days, had, IVs stuck in my arm the entire time. It sucked ass. I hated it. It was like purgatory. It was terrible. I never want to go through that again. And I know eventually in my old age, down the line, I'll probably be there again. And at that point, it's like, just fucking kill me. I don't want to be here anymore. If I'm 80 and I'm just stuck on IVs for the rest of my life, I'd just rather, God end it right there. But the point being is that I went through that for 5 days, and it was awful. And even after, the antibiotics did its job, it was still a puffy mess, and I could barely move my arm. I actually had to put it in a sling most of the time, and I had to ice it pretty much, every few hours, just because it felt like it was on fire still. And that took like another 3 weeks to fully heal. And obviously 3 weeks later is fight day, so I couldn't make it. So I had to cancel it. It was awful. I cried my eyes out, honestly, just because like I really wanted to do this. Like I marked in my calendar of all the things I want to achieve this year, I want that at least. And it just didn't happen. It was honestly just bad luck. Like that is such a freak, accident type of thing to happen in a fight training camp. It's not something that happens typically, but it just happened to happen to me, and it's just like shit.
And that
sucks.
That relates back to though what it is you were talking about in that article you wrote, Why We Struggle, because I went through my own RSI injury, and I blew out both of my elbows, and you have I think something like 43 different types of micro ligaments in your arms, in your flexors and extensors, and I blew out both my arms in 2009 and 2012. Or excuse me, 2010, 2012, repeatedly, and I've had multiple injuries. So it's about fighting through it. After my injuries, I went back and continued playing the guitar and drawing. And initially, the doctors told me I would never hold a pencil or a guitar pick again. And you have to have that mental resilience to handle it. And I think that's why the article you wrote about Berserk speaks truth. It's because the comic book that you were talking about, it resonates with people because there's a little bit of guts in everyone if you choose to find that strength to overcome that darkness. So I think you got a lot right there that I think most people will relate to, the adversity, Yeah.
I mean, I think the point of like Berserk is that we struggle because we as bad as things get, as depressing as life can get, like your life can, for instance, be negative like maybe 80% of the time, perhaps. Like you just have an awful life for whatever reason. Like things just never go your way. But the thing that Berserk kind of posits is that, those little moments where things are actually great are worth living for. Like, even if you only get it like 20% of the time, it like literally will make up for all of that. Like those little moments where things are awesome or things are cool, or you're with your friends and life is good for just those moments, like that makes life worth living, even when most of the time it sucks. And that's kind of why I wrote that, is that life can suck most of the time, but those times where it doesn't suck is worth keeping yourself alive for.
So I want to transition because we got a few more minutes left before the segment ends, and I want to ask you, we've gone through that whole arc where you went through the injury and you're on the other side of the injury. So do you have plans to get back in the ring? Do you have plans to schedule another fight? Can you tell us about that briefly?
Yeah, absolutely. I fully plan to fight eventually. This is just something that I told myself I'll not be satisfied with my martial arts until I do it. Like, it's just like I've kind of going back to, being always kind of shitty at sports growing up. I've never scored a touchdown in my life, never hit a home run. Like I said, my grand total box score in basketball is 1 point. And to me, like, because I feel genuinely good at this, I want to prove it to myself that I am. And the only way I can prove that is by fighting. Like, because otherwise, again, it's all just theory. Like, it's all imagination and fantasy. And one of the things I went through the last few years and my change in my mental outlook is that I'm fucking done with fantasy. Like, I'm tired of fantasizing about better things. I want to just do it now. So fighting for me is about finally living that fantasy, living, that joy of actually competing for real instead of just imagining something better for myself. So, yeah, I absolutely plan to fight probably sometime later in the year.
All right, Wes. I really appreciate you kind of filling us back up on that. I really appreciate you, talking about your plans. When you plan on scheduling the fight, we'd love to have you on the show and do like another review, another like fight update when you're actually scheduled for another one. Right now, that's the end of the segment, so we're about to go to another 5-minute break, but I hope you guys stick around for the last segment with Amir and Wes.
Sounds good.
Hey everybody, we are back from intermission. We still have Wes here with us. So now we're going to transition a little bit, since you know that Wes is very involved in fighting and specifically follows MMA. The plan is for me to ask him about an upcoming fight that's coming up. So the fight in particular we're going to talk about right now is the Jake Paul versus Tommy Fury fight coming up in Riyadh on February 26th. So Wes, I'm going to give it off to you. Can you give me a brief synopsis of both fighters and then segue into who you think will win the fight?
Yeah, so I've only kind of watched in, passing what's going on with Jake Paul and his, boxing career. I obviously saw his, knockout of Nate Robinson, way back, I don't know, a couple years ago. And, when he knocked out Ben Askren too, which, both were really not surprising. If you know Ben Askren, he's not really a striker.
Right.
So he was definitely going to lose that. And then Nate Robinson, he's not a fighter, he's a basketball player. But I was kind of surprised that he beat Silva. I didn't see the actual fight, but from what I saw and little highlights, it felt like Silva might have been carrying him. That's just my observation, because it's hard for me to believe Silva, full power is not knocking that guy out. And then of course there's Tyron Woodley, and that was a little surprising to me. But again.
So can you speak on that? Why Tyron was surprising? I actually am interested to hear your take on that.
Surprising knocking out Tyron.
Yes, specifically.
Knocking out Tyron was crazy. Just because Tyron is he's not a striker first, but he can absolutely strike, and. He's knocked out some heavy hitters in mixed martial arts, and I just assumed that, he knows what he's doing, so he should be, fine against basically another amateur and fencing. But he just, screwed up. There's not really any other way to describe it.
Do you think maybe Tyron lost his cool? Potentially?
I'm sorry?
Do you think Tyron might have lost his cool? Because I know there was a lot of banter leading up to the fight with Jake and Tyron especially going at one another. Do you think he might have just lost his temper, lost his cool a little bit in the fight, and that affected his mentality?
Honestly, it's actually more the opposite. Based on what I saw, I felt like Tyron was too tentative. He was too... I think he was thinking so hard about I can't lose to this guy that he ended up basically, not going as all out as he could have. And, toward the end of his MMA career, he was already a very tentative fighter. He was starting to slow down, and he was, he wasn't as, his killer instinct just wasn't there anymore. And I think he was so afraid of getting embarrassed by Jake that he ended up getting embarrassed. He just obviously for a professional mixed martial artist who was once a champion to lose to, I don't know, is he a YouTube star? I really don't know his background that well, but a guy who just took up boxing I don't know how many years ago, and obviously if I had a background like his going into a fight against a guy that by all intents and purposes I should be able to destroy, I might be a little tentative about going crazy, because the thing about fighting people who don't know what they're doing, just because in my experience, like I, train with sometimes people who are beginners and they're just starting sparring. There's two types of beginners when it comes to sparring: the guys who are mega tentative and basically don't move at all, and they just end up becoming, standing punching bags for you. And then there's the type of beginners who have no control and just throw wildly. And those are actually harder, in my opinion, sometimes harder people to fight than people who are, know what they're doing.
Yeah, Wes,
they're more unpredictable.
That's a great point. I want to just, since we're gonna be short on time, I want to go quickly to your opinion on Tommy Fury, since I feel like this is the first fighter that maybe can stand toe to toe with Jake and is like.
You're breaking up a lot. I can barely hear you.
Okay, can you hear me now? Is that better?
A little bit.
Okay, yeah. Apologies for that, and to the listeners as well, apologies. So real quick, I just want to get your opinion on Tommy Fury, Tyson's brother, because I want to know what you think of him, and if you think he's going to, give Jake Paul a run for his money in this case, because I feel like Tommy has got a pretty solid fundamentals when it comes to boxing. So can I get your opinion on that?
I mean, in this case, I don't know Tommy Fury that well. I don't follow boxing as closely as the other combat sports out there. But, Tommy Fury is obviously, he's got that lineage with Tyson Fury, which is definitely counts for something. And, he's an actual, professional boxer. Off the top of my head, I couldn't tell you what his record is. But, this would be, from what I understand, at least, Jake Paul's first legitimate boxer that he's facing, not just an amateur, not just a guy who has a different combat sports background and happens to do boxing. He's fighting a guy who for real knows boxing. And that is a big difference. I can tell you right now, just as, a guy who likes to kickbox, I've done just boxing sparring, and it is difficult to make that transition just because the footwork is way different when you're boxing as opposed to kickboxing. You take a whole arsenal out of the equation, and sometimes as a kickboxer, you use your kicks to set up punches and vice versa, and when you take one half of that out of it, it does throw you off. And so that might be why a guy like Tyron Woodley lost, and why Anderson Silva may have lost his fight. But in the case of Tyson Fury, he's an actual boxer. He's an actual guy with pedigree who's learned, I'm assuming, learns directly under his brother, who is, by all measures, the best heavyweight in the world. And, that's going to really suck for him if he ends up losing to Jake. So, but if I had to guess, I'm going to say probably Tyson, just because he's an actual boxer.
Tommy?
Jake keeps on surprising people, so can't count him out.
So you're on the record for Tommy then?
Repeat that. You're breaking up again.
I said you're on the record for Tommy Fury then, right, Wes?
Yes, I am on the record for Tommy Fury.
Awesome. And just so you know, I think you made a good choice. So Tommy's record is 8-0 with 4 knockouts in all his bouts so far. So he's undefeated at the moment, going into this fight. Jake is, to be fair, is undefeated too with 6-0 record. But as you pointed out, Jake has faced Nate Robinson, who did not have any fighting background, heading in an NBA player that's 5'9", to put it in perspective, to Jake's, I believe, over 6 feet. And then you also have, obviously, Ben Askren, like you pointed out, who is not at all a striker. So that also, I feel like, was kind of a scripted fight in many ways. And that's a hot take from me, but I feel like that was completely a scripted fight. That was meant for Jake to win. That was set up on their behalf. This, I feel like, is not scripted, though. I feel like this actually finally is the fight that's going to show people that have been doubting Jake forever if he's actually legit. If he can actually go toe-to-toe with a boxer that legitimately can knock him out.
Yeah, I would agree. If he ends up beating Fury by a considerable margin, knocks him out, and there's no doubt to it, then yeah, I think at the very least you got to take him seriously as a professional boxer, maybe not a champion or the pound for pound greatest, but like he'd be legit at that point in my view. Like you can't, put any asterisk next to his name anymore.
Yeah, definitely. Really quick, the other fighter I want to get some info from you about, because and it's a female fighter who's gone from MMA, she's gone to WWE, she's been involved she's arguably regarded as one of the greatest female fighters of all time, Ronda Rousey. And I wanted to see what you think about Ronda Rousey and really just give a synopsis of her as a fighter, if you can. If you can.
I apologize, that all broke up again.
Sorry. Can you, is it clear now on my end?
I'm sorry?
Is it clear now on my end? Are you able to hear me on my end, Wes?
Yes.
Okay. Again, apologies, listeners. Apologies, Wes. So the fighter I referred to was Ronda Rousey. If you can hear, you can. Okay. So Ronda, I just wanted to know if you can give a quick synopsis of your view on Ronda, as a fighter and as a personality.
Well, that's a loaded question. Let's see. As a fighter, I mean, she's one of the pioneers of women's mixed martial arts. Love her or hate her, she made it popular. I mean, certainly endeared me to the women's game. Like, I have a lot of favorite female mixed martial artists and combat sports athletes. She's obviously made judo a big deal. Like, she's legit when it comes to that. Like, that's how she beat her first 9 opponents. Like, they're all by armbar. But then she transitioned to WWE. I don't follow wrestling as closely as I used to. From what I understand, she had kind of a mixed bag career there. As a personality, she's a little too abrasive for my taste. I think she's a little overly sensitive, and I think she has kind of little woman syndrome where everything's taken personally. I'm not sure if any of you guys watched The Ultimate Fighter when she was coaching opposite of Misha Tate, but that was like the time when everyone's like, oh shit, like Ronda's kind of an asshole, like, because she kind of revealed that she has like some issues, to say the least. And when she lost like to Holly Holm, like that broke her, and I felt bad for sure when she went through that. But I think
on that note, Wes,
I think she just wasn't ready for that loss, and she didn't really have a game plan for the possibility that she could lose, and like everyone to see her like that. And it's unfortunate that she never really recovered from that, because I think if she had taken the time to reevaluate herself, she might have decided to go to a different gym, because I don't think the gym she was training at was particularly good, and she should have transitioned to a more legit fight camp. I think that could have prepared her better in terms of striking, because basically the women's game caught up to her finally. The way she was fighting was good enough to win, because nobody had an answer for her judo back in the day, because most of the women starting out back in the day were more like the first day MMA, where it's like you're just elite at one skill, and if that one skill is better than the other person's elite skill, then that's enough, and they're going to win.
Absolutely, Wes.
More balance, so I think that's why she lost.
Yeah, absolutely. We just that was a fantastic analysis. I really appreciate it, especially the point on her loss, how she dealt with it. I think that's something for all fighters to take. I think you made a fantastic point about the fact that if you have a loss like that, it's how you cope with the loss, come back from it, hopefully become stronger from it, and really try to improve some of the skills and takeaways from that loss. So I think that was great.
Hey, so we are going to now move on to the next segment, and we'll be back in just a moment with the last segment of the show.
Cool.
Hey, and we're back for the final segment. This is me, Kenan, the co-host, and I'm here with Wesley Dugle, and we are going to do the final segment. It's called Fucked Up Flashcards. The rules are simple. Answer as many questions that are super fucked up in 2 minutes flat. Don't think about your answers. Just vomit something out. The worse it is, the better it is.
Let's see what happens here.
All right. And... All right. Would you rather have Khabib give you a flying elbow to the temple, or would you rather get kicked in the balls by Megan Rapinoe?
Who was giving me the flying elbow again?
Khabib Nurmagomedov.
Maybe the flying elbow.
All right, number 2, cats or dogs?
Cats.
All right, now you have to skin a cat.
Oh, lame.
All right, burritos or tacos?
Burritos.
All right, swimming or running?
Swimming.
All right, 5-alarm fire wings from Fire Eaters, or the lava sauce from La Vic's?
Lava sauce.
All right. T or A?
B or A?
T or A, tits or ass?
Oh, tits.
All right. Retake all of English 1A and 1B, or read and write a 5,000-word essay on the art of the deal.
Oh, God. Probably art of the deal, because I could probably take that down a few notches.
All right. Jump rope or planks?
Planks.
All right. Sunrise or sunset?
Sunset.
Okay. Chug a bottle of proper 12 while McGregor punches you in the stomach, or drink an entire bottle of Tide?
I'll do proper 12, because I'm dying if I drink Tide.
While McGregor punches you in the stomach. All right.
I have a chance to live if I do that one.
All right. And we are out of time. So now the last question we have for you. What would you do for a White Claw?
What would I do for a White Claw?
Yeah.
I'm pretty apathetic toward them, so not really much, honestly. Like.
All right. Well, that's the end of the fucked up flashcard segment. So at the end, we give you a White Claw, but you're not here in person, so we'll have to send you something through Bevmo and send you a White Claw through Bevmo.
Sure. Thank you. I'd appreciate that.
All right, that's the last segment of the show. I want to thank the listeners for sticking around. Wes, I want to thank you for sticking around despite all the goofy stuff that happened with the technical errors. But, we appreciate your time. We appreciate the listeners. This is Let's Fucking Go with Amir and Friends. I'm Keenan Fry, the co-host, and we're out of here. See you later!
Have a good one.